So a bigger engine was offered. It was a 400 cubic inch engine, and it only produced 156-ish horsepower. So which kind of
total or compared to the 3, like 156 more than the 302?
It made 156 horsepower and produced 260 foot-pounds of torque.
Well, welcome back. What have you been working on this week?
Throwing wrenches, getting mad at stuff. This is pure frustration. Yeah, it's just funny that I think a lot of manufacturers make parts overseas for American cars.
Yeah.
And a lot of people here in the States will sell you those parts, and you get a throttle cable for your Bronco, and you order it for a Bronco, but it's actually a Mustang throttle cable. The ends don't work. You got to do all these modifications to one end or the other, and you got to change one to a clevis from the ball. And anyway, it just and then you got to cut it, and it's just like, can they not just make like a 10-inch cable that has the right ends on it and things like that? So I've been making a list of all of this stuff. I'm going to fix this problem and just come up with the right part. Maybe I get Tom's to make it and sell it, and it'll be a part that fits when you put it in, and you can take what takes an hour and a half to 2 hours and make it a 20-minute job. It's just like, look, call it a Bronco cable and it fits your Bronco.
Yeah.
So
I've messed with that throttle cable. I did one, like a low car one, and I mean, you have to like do a loop that comes around and then attaches, because like the S is too sharp for it to make it around. So yeah, I totally get what you're talking about. So frustrating.
Well, and I figured that whole S thing out. I made it work. I just had to customize a bracket that doesn't pull it way away from the throttle pedal where it comes through the firewall. So anyway, just that sort of stuff. But I'm trying to look at these as opportunities.
Yeah.
And because I know I'm not going to do it that way again. So it's like, how hard is it to make a bracket?
Yeah, it's true. We've all been there. Well, I haven't done any Bronco work this week. I've just been.
You're still in the bathroom?
Yeah. No, I'm not working on the bathroom. I've been working. So unfortunately, that takes time too. I do full-time video production. I have my own company, and but I get to do cool stuff though, because I actually work with a guy, Ian Johnson. He's one of my clients, and he has the show on Motor Trend called Four Wheeler. But he always gets these random projects as well. And he's doing a show for Motor Trend right now as well with Christian Hazel called 4x4 Garage. And so we're actually, I'm filming it and editing it, and it's going on YouTube. So you can check it out on YouTube, 4x4 Garage. But it's like they had a Cummins R2.8 Jeep, and they are taking the engine and drivetrain out of it because the engine like literally outlasted the Jeep. Jeep's like crumbling around it. Put it on a new chassis, stretched it, making it a pretty cool off-road rig. And then they actually are working on one of the first test rigs for the Cummins 24 valve in a truck. So like Cummins years ago, put 24 valve in a Chevy truck and, started testing it. So, I mean, Cummins, they do all this testing, and I've worked with them on a couple different projects. Really cool company, and they do really cool work. So, so it's fun being able to, I still work around cars. I still, but I'm usually filming someone else do the work and then editing it when I get home. So, not actually doing the work this week, but filming over there. But
if you're watching Ian, you're watching someone do it right.
That's right.
So,
yeah. And he can fab up anything in his shop. Like it's almost easier for him to fab something up than to try to make something bought off the shelf work. It's like, I see him struggle more when it's like, what is, this bought off the shelf part? Like, how do I make it fit? But otherwise he's like, let me just go to the plasma table and cut that out, and then I'll weld this together, and then I'll, and it's like watching him work is incredible. So yeah, it's fun. All right. Well, this episode, we promised this at the beginning or the end of last year. We're going to start going through the generation 2 through 5, maybe 6. So today is all about the second generation Ford Bronco. And this is a favorite, obviously, like such a cool Bronco. It looks cool. And when you see them, you're like, oh, that's such an iconic big Bronco. I think everyone calls it the big Bronco. And David Young had one at Ford Fest when we were out there in October, and he had got it from his dad and rebuilt it. And it just, that Bronco is so iconic. And so it's not as iconic as the first generation. It's not the OJ generation, but I feel like it's the Bronco that when you get into Broncos, you go, wait, what's that? It's like this, like, oh yeah, I have a first gen, or, oh yeah, I like I have a fifth gen, but then you see the second gen and you're like, oh, what is this one, this beauty over here? So I really like the second generation.
Yeah, some of the design things that went into that, the whole process that they went through, it took them forever, but it just turned out so good. The roof was so much better than the K5 roof once they got it figured out. So are we gonna do like between Gen 5 and 6, like cricket noises, and like have an episode where we don't have anything but like nature sounds?
Yeah, it'll just be beautiful nature for how many
nothing
years?
Happened.
14 years?
Too long.
24 years, right?
Yeah. Worth the wait, but still.
Yeah.
I remember the Gen 2 Bronco. I have a story from when I was a kid, and specifically like my friend Ronnie Myers. I lived way up in northern Indiana where we got feet of snow, and his dad had a 79 Bronco that was silver, and it was on I think 40-inch monster whatever the biggest tire was they made. They were at least 38-inch tires back then, and really wide. The tires were like giant blown up donuts.
Balloons.
Like river rafts. They were so huge, and it had little 15-inch rims, or whatever the biggest size you could get back then was. Maybe, I don't know if 16s were out yet, probably, but, and super deep dish wheels, and it was all tire and no rim.
Yeah.
And you could hear that truck come in from blocks away. So we'd be in Ronnie's garage, and we'd be putting all of his dad's tools back because we knew he was coming. But I'm sure his garage was spotless. He knew we were in there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, in the winter, I remember the winter of 78, 79, they would just come pick me up, and they'd come down the street, and we have cars parked on both sides of the street, and there was one lane in between them, and they'd just come barreling through these 4-foot snow drifts, just jumping this thing in the air. It'd be bouncing over the roofs of the other cars and the drifts. And, there would be only emergency vehicles were allowed out, but we were always out in that truck pulling anybody out that was, dumb enough to go out in those conditions, kind of like what they just had in Buffalo, drifts over houses and things like that. They would always be out in that truck and would pick me up, and we had such good memories. We went four-wheeling in that truck and climbed a hill, and I learned what it meant at 11 years old to pucker up. It was crazy. I thought I was gonna die. I swore we were going to flip over backwards because it was so bouncy on those tires. But that truck was gorgeous, and I just remember it was a fantastic truck.
Yeah. One of my buddies, you telling that story reminded me, he had a 78 second gen. And whenever we went out, I had a Jeep Cherokee, and he would pull me behind him because, that would be us on the trail, is just him pulling me behind him, because my Jeep Cherokee did nothing. It couldn't make it anywhere. I would get stuck. I'd be spinning tires. I don't even think I had lockers in it, but he would just, hop in, put a tow strap on me, and just pull me out of whatever trail we were on. But yeah, I love the second gen Bronco.
Well, size matters, right? That thing was so big. I remember though, when we pulled people out of the snow, they didn't have snatched like the stretchy straps back then. Yeah. And he just about ripped their bumpers off. Every time he hit it so hard, they'd be like, he'd pull them out for sure, but I think he bent all kinds of parts on people's cars. It was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, getting into the history of the second gen Bronco, we were talking about this back in one of our latter history episodes. Really they started planning the second gen Bronco in the like 74, 73, 74 type time period. And because of the oil crisis or whatever it was that was going on, it got pushed back, and they kept doing just these upgrades to the first generation Bronco. And so even though the second gen Bronco was only really produced in 78 and 79, it would have come out, I believe it was 74 or 75 that it actually would have come out. So it's interesting to think about that and to know the history. But like even, Ford was working on this because in 1972, the Chevy Blazer came out. The Chevy Blazer came out in the 60s, but in 1972, the Blazer was outselling the Ford Bronco first gen 2-1. Yeah. I mean, Ford is looking at this going, we have to do something.
I think it was 69 or 70. It was like 44,000 Blazers to 22,000 Broncos, so somewhere in that neighborhood. And they actually started the full-size Bronco actually pilots or not production models, but prototypes in 1972. There are letters where going back and forth from this Karen and Company did the two prototypes for them. And they're very different. They look the same, but like the B pillars up by the roof, which was radically different. And there's I might have been 72. They had already figured that whole top out. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, in talking about the top and the Blazer was just a shortened, C10, a Chevy truck, so it was a shorter bed with a back seat and then with the hard top on there. So the hard top was a unique feature, but it was also a shorter bed. So Ford's looking at this going, hey, we've got our 6th gen F100 out. What if we just chop the bed, shorten it, and put the, a hard top on there? So, they did, they actually took the Blazer's hard top and started test fitting those first designs that you were just talking about, that actually had a Chevy, a version of the Chevy hardtop on there in those prototypes. And I just think that's so interesting that, that was kind of the birth of the Bronco 2 was with a Chevy Blazer hardtop.
Yeah, they actually bought Blazer fiberglass roofs. So in Todd's book, there's a picture of the two trucks, the one with the Ford designed rear roof and the one with the Blazer roof that actually had like hinges, and you can see how much better design they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny that it took them so long to get it done.
I do. Yeah. We're talking about Todd Zerker's book, The Legendary History of the Ford Bronco. Definitely pick one of those up if you haven't yet. If you're listen to this podcast, watching it, you've heard us talk about it, you need one, go get one. But yeah, Todd talks a lot about the design of the 2nd gen Bronco in his book.
I think it's like there's like 16 pages on the Gen 2 in there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he gets these pictures. He has the best sources through Ford Motor Company, and they've really given him some, like the renderings are just amazing that are in there from that period.
Yeah.
But, they came out with the Shorthorn. They made 4 prototypes before they decided. So I guess this is between 72 and 74. They came up with about 4 prototypes: a Shorthorn, which is the size of a Blazer, a Midhorn, which was the size of an Expedition, and then a Longhorn, which was the size of the Suburban, which is funny because we know they made the Centurion, which was a 4-door full-size Blazer for a couple of years maybe. They're really hard to find.
Full-size Bronco, the Centurion. Yeah,
Bronco.
You said Blazer.
Not Blazer. Yeah. And those are really rare.
So rare.
But then the fourth thing they made was this one called a Widehorn, which ironically was 6 inches wider, more off-road. So it really had this Raptor-esque look to it. And of course, it was just a a prototype, and then they ultimately chose the Shorthorn as the truck that they were going to run with for production reasons, and it's still, it's still way bigger, but it's funny that, they come out with all these models in this work, and then they just narrow it down to one, and that's what they roll with.
Yeah. Totally. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting was, they obviously started with the F100 and used the front clip and the hood and, the doors, and then kind of used some of the back, but they obviously shortened it, Shorthorn, and used the Chevy Blazer top on it. But what I thought was interesting about it was they actually started calling it the F-Wagon.
I wondered, because I had something in here where in 1975 it was called the 1975.5 F-Wagon, and I didn't know what the F, it was F apostrophe wagon. It's like
right.
Effing wagon. What were they thinking here?
I always thought that was funny. Like, oh, the F wagon. Okay. Like, who is thinking this is a good idea? Like who's going, what we'll call it? But what if they did? Like, what if we had the first generation Bronco and then we had the F wagon? Like, it's just
it's because it took so long. These guys are like, I want a different job.
Yeah.
I've been on this full-size Bronco for 7 years.
But I'm glad they didn't change it. But it was, because it was so similar to the F100, it was called the F-Wagon internally.
Yeah, not what I thought.
Yeah.
I always like to look at the designers and see who was the designer on the project and what they did, because we talked about all that in the early Bronco. And then this truck is so different. It doesn't share one part, I don't believe. So the main designer that was tasked with this project from Ford, his name was Dick Nesbitt, and he was from the truck division, which only makes sense because he says use all the parts you can from assembly, to reduce manufacturing costs. And his notable design elements to me on the Gen 2 Bronco are the side windows on the roof. Because there was an argument about having 4 rounded corners on those side glass because it made the fiberglass stronger. And if they were pointed, they were 4 weak points structurally. So they came up with this: opposite corners were pointed and opposite corners were rounded. So you had 2 rounded, 2 pointed, and it made just this beautiful shape for glass. And then they matched the B pillar to that shape. So the pillar behind the door handle that goes up the roof has this big wide angle, and it's really attractive.
Yeah.
And when you separate the body line color from the roof line, it just doesn't look clunky.
Yep.
It's not a vertical line there, and it's radiused at the bottom. And it's, to me, it makes the full-size Bronco look way better than the Blazer.
Yeah.
And then what's really cool is there's, in Todd Zerker's book, there's page 100, they have all these renderings that Todd was able to get access of like the artist renderings of that whole roof system and it made the whole truck. But you'll see the backs of 2 trucks and the differences between them. So I feel like that he really just killed the design on that truck. That the roof line, I don't know if you know that pillar I was talking about, it goes up and over the roof and is raised, kind of like a headband. And they call that the Targa band.
Huh.
And it's a design element that makes the roof work with the body. But there's funny, there was another fully detailed Shorthorn that was made by Ford as a prototype or concept, and it was all gold inside and out. And it had a topper, and they took that roof and they brought it way up, and it looks really goofy. And they took the side windows out, so it looks like a topper, and it's kind of silly looking. But it had, like, they were bragging about it, had simulated sheepwood on the inside. I'm like, what the heck is sheepwood? So I'm doing a search on the internet. I can't find anything except for pictures of sheep painted on wood. It's like, so if somebody knows what sheepwood, not inexpensive, but like,
yeah.
Let me know what that is.
Sheepwood. Let us know. Leave a little comment if you know what sheepwood is.
Yeah.
Or if you have a picture, better yet. Or if you have the Bronco with sheepwood. That would be the best.
The Bronco.
The Bronco. Yeah, I mean, when the second generation came out in 78, the Ford was actually using the second iteration of the F100 grill. So the F100, because sixth generation F100 is that 73 to 77. So you'll see on the early F100s or different ones of the dent side, that the top of the grill it's like a separate section that has, I think it's Ford or something across the grill. They used the second version of that, which is the one that we all know as the second gen Bronco grill, but that was on the Ford truck, Ford F100 as well. And, compared to the early Bronco, like you said earlier, this was the big Bronco. This was, it was a good bit bigger. The wheelbase on it was 12 inches longer. So you went from 92 on the first gen to 104 on the second generation. The overall length was 30 inches longer, 152 inches to 180 inches. Like, I just think that's a crazy, that's 30 inches is a big deal when you're talking about going off-road. Like, that drastically changed the approach angle. It changed the departure angle. Like, all of that is changing with this off-road vehicle. And the overall width went from 69 inches to 79 inches. So 10 inches wider. But think about what that did inside the cab. Like, you just have so much more leg room. I'm a tall guy driving a first gen Bronco. Like, I feel a little crushed, like I feel like I'm kind of ducking to look under the windshield, just different stuff. And so that second gen really gave that luxury feel. And I think it was Motor Trend wrote a write-up of it, or maybe Four Wheeler Magazine or something. And they said it's like off-roading in a Mercedes,
That's perfect.
Yeah, it's just like that classic, luxury feel while you're wheeling.
What everything was bigger. We'll talk about like the engine and everything else, but when you just look at the sheer weight of the truck, the Shorthorn weighed in at 4,717 pounds, which is compared to the early Bronco, 3,500 pounds was the heaviest I think it ever got. So it's like 40% heavier. Oh my gosh. It probably did ride like a Mercedes on the trail. Yeah. Emissions also during that period, this is ironic, but they were just choking the engine's horsepower in the late 70s. So they offered a bigger engine, a 400 cubic inch. I don't know if it got better gas mileage, but the emissions were better.
Really?
And so they offered like 30 some and 41 gallon tanks so that you could, because the mileage was terrible. It was about the emissions, not the mileage.
Yeah.
So this is,
yeah. Keep the ozone layer, but burn fuel.
That's right. Burn twice the fuel.
Yeah.
So a bigger engine was offered. It was a 400 cubic inch engine for $167 more. Wow. And it only produced 156-ish horsepower. So it's kind of
total or compared to the 3, like 156 more than the 302?
It made 156 horsepower and produced 260 foot-pounds of torque. So you're like, well, maybe it made a way more torque than the early Bronco. But I compared that to the early Bronco, which made 135 horse or 20 horse less and 243 foot-pounds of torque. So 19 less foot-pounds of torque, but in a truck that weighed so much more.
Oh, wow.
So but everybody was under the same gun there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the manufacturers were suffering from the same things.
Man.
Another option. This is a big deal. It came out in the upsized Bronco, which is an upsized transmission called the C6, and that automatic transmission was $197 more. It was the one used in a lot of their bigger trucks, utility vehicles, things like that. And they're like, it's indestructible, which it was.
But still a 3-speed, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
So
I've looked at that one. It's still a 3-speed transmission. So it's like not even an overdrive.
It was called the Selecto Shifto Cruiso-Matic. I maybe added a few O's in there, but those were the names in the 70s. All this greatly added to the weight of the truck and the new size body, and it was just they were massive.
Yeah.
Massively heavy.
Massively heavy. And I mean, it is interesting, like not not a whole lot of difference under the hood. I would love to get my hands on a 400. Like, I think that would be super cool to rebuild one of those. And I know that there's more parts out there for all those, but yeah, that would be cool to get my hands on a 400.
They just, yeah, they have more material around the cylinder walls, so you can bore them way out.
Yeah.
And that's what all the drag racers did.
Yeah. Well, in 1978, there was a record 77,917 Broncos made. That's just crazy. That is a 436% increase over the 1977 early Bronco. And, you know, you're looking at this and it's like, in my head, I always thought, oh, the second gen, it only went 2 years. Like, it didn't do as well as the early Bronco. But in 1 year, they almost completely topped, you know, the entire production of the early Bronco. And in 1979, they did it again by producing 104,000 second generation Broncos. That's crazy.
Well, that if you total those up, that's like 181,000 Broncos, which was almost the total early Bronco production. It was just a little over 200,000.
Yeah.
And they did it in 2 years with a full-size Bronco.
Yes. It's nuts. Like, you just always think, oh, only 2 years, it must be so rare. They are rare. They are hard to find, but now to find out, oh, there was almost as many made as the Bronco. Like, it's
total
crazy.
Early Broncos in 2 years. That's nuts.
Yeah.
They did have some cool trim level packages though. Stripes were big in the late 70s. I mean, they were on your sweatsuits. Yeah. They were on furniture.
Yeah.
They were on your rugs, everything. And they had one of the trucks had a trim package called the chromatic stripe.
Yeah.
And that went on for a couple of years. So that was on the third level. So the 3 levels that you could get were the custom, which I believe some of those had round headlights.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They had like the old grill and they had painted bumpers.
Wow.
Very little chrome, no chrome around the windows. And then the next level was the Ranger XLT, which was the majority of the production. They had chrome bumpers. Most of the grill was chrome around the windows. And then the last package was a freewheeling package. And that's where you got that crazy cool stripe. And the freewheeling package was like $487. And you should see these like sunset fade stripes on the truck. Oh, it's like red to yellow with a little orange in the middle on a black truck. It was so striking and so 1979.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the interior packages, and I love the look. I mean, you got the wood accents, in there. You've got, I was just looking at different trims and stuff like that, and it's like you've got all these features that I just think, man, it looked so cool, and it probably felt, going from a classic Ford Bronco with like, the metal panel inserts and the metal floor and the metal roof. And then it's like, you got this carpet kit and you got wood trim going on. It was just like so bougie.
Shag carpeting and captain's chairs. And no, seriously, I think the captain's chairs were $500. They were more money than all the other options put together practically.
Wow.
But that's what people wanted. You're right. The insides were plush.
Yes.
Like a custom van.
You mentioned the custom package having round headlights possibly, and I was trying to look it up, but I couldn't find it. One of my Instagram followers reached out to me, and he's in like South America somewhere, and he was saying that there are a bunch of what I think is like the prototype of the Bronco, because it has the old style grill. It has a different hard top. Like, he was showing me all these pictures, and it's like a different second generation Bronco. It looks a lot like the second gen Bronco, but it was in the 40s, in 1974, 1975 that they started popping up.
Oh, wow.
I know. So interesting. And he doesn't know a whole lot about it, but it was just one of those like, oh man, that's so like such an interesting, facet, just because it didn't come in America doesn't mean that, the Bronco wasn't released somewhere else and some production units got sold in South America. But well, with that, we're in luck with the first generation because we have all these great vendors like Tom's Off-Road where it's like, man, you can go and literally build an entire Bronco from their catalog. But with second gen, it's not that easy, and there aren't as many vendors out there where you can just go and buy stuff. But just in my research, I found LMC Truck actually has a lot of the panels and a lot of stuff for the second generation Bronco, and it makes it just easy to find stuff around there. They have, obviously they have a lot of stuff with the F100s and stuff like that, but definitely LMC Truck is one of those places where you can go and find stuff, and then you can still get a lot of the stuff from Tom's Off-Road. It might not be labeled a second generation Bronco, but when you have similar axles, when you have similar engines and stuff like that, it makes it easy to find some of that stuff and get some of that stuff.
Well, I know if you go to their website and you type in 1979, it'll offer you Bronco U150, and they have everything. They have patch panels. They have, floor pans.
Yeah.
They have pedal assemblies. They have all the interior parts, doors, fenders. They literally have quite a bit of stuff for the Gen 2 Bronco.
Yeah. LMC Truck. That's good to know. Good to know. All right. Well, be on the lookout. Next podcast coming up is going to be Generation 3. I'm excited to get into that one. I want a Gen 3 right now as well. I'm looking for one. But yeah, and if you haven't yet, leave us a review. We're doing a sticker giveaway. Grab a screenshot of your review on iTunes and screenshot it, email it to us at questions@thebroncast.com, and we'll send you a little sticker pack with some of our stickers, but it also will put you in a better place to be ready for our future giveaways that we're going to be doing later on this year on the podcast.
Pretty soon.
Pretty soon.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys.